So the very first attribute we'll be looking at today is the aseity or the independence of God. And the word aseity comes from a Latin word meaning of or from himself. And that leads us straight to our definition, which is that God is self-existent. He is unlike every created thing. He is creator in that he has given himself his own existence. Nothing has there's no cause for God. God is his own cause. So he's self-existent, and not only is he self-existent, he's self-sustaining. He sustains his own existence throughout, totally unlike us, right? We need air to survive. We need a complex biome in our gut, right, for us to survive. And we have many things that we depend on. But God is not so. And lastly, God is self-blessed. He A part of the sustenance that he gives himself is he himself is perpetually happy. He doesn't need anything or anyone outside of himself to give him joy. When God created the world, he did so not because he was lonely, where he wasn't like a parent where maybe your kids moved out of the house and then you got a dog because you got a little lonely. God was always happy. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, perpetually blessed. And he has created us out of the abundance of his own heart. And so Wayne Grudem really summed it up nicely. He says this. He says, God does not need us or the rest of creation for anything, yet we and the rest of creation can glorify him and bring him joy. No, and when we think of God's aseity, this is something that's assumed since the very beginning of the Bible. In Genesis 1:1, it says, in the beginning, God. It just simply assumes God's existence because God is the uncreated one who has created the entire universe. One of my favorite passages where God's aseity is revealed is in Acts chapter 17, which we looked at last week when Paul is addressing the Athenians who have some form of knowledge of God, but it is unclear. It is something that Paul has to fully explain and proclaim. And this is what Paul tells these pagans about who God is. And this is what he says. He says, the God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. And I love this passage because when we as Christians serve and obey God, we have to keep in mind the aseity of God, or else we serve and love God as the pagans did in Paul's world. You see, the pagans, they believed, yes, that God was more powerful than them, that God has perhaps even made them, but they didn't believe that God was fully independent. They believed that humans somehow added to God's joy. They believed that humans somehow sustained God's happiness. They believed they had like a give and take relationship with God. So they believed, for example, let's say you worshiped Poseidon. Poseidon would give his worshippers particular services. Like if you were to go on a voyage to Rome, you give a offering to Poseidon, and Poseidon he doesn't disrupt the water so that you don't die on your way to Rome. So Poseidon gives you some services. He gives you benefits, but you also give benefits to Poseidon. You would create wonderful temples for him. You would build temples that are bigger than temples of other gods. You would be faithful in giving your sacrifices to Poseidon. And these are not just gestures, but you really believe that in a real way, as you sacrifice animals, you're feeding Poseidon. Because the gods, although they are more powerful than you are, they believe that gods actually need man to feed the gods. They believe that as we give our sacrifices, their tithes and their offerings to God, that the gods needed this. If not for their existence, they believe that these things sustained, if not God's existence, God's happiness. As we, sing worship to Poseidon, it would kind of flatter Poseidon. It's like, oh yeah, I'm great. Yeah, and Poseidon wouldn't get insecure and angry. And we have to worship Poseidon alone because otherwise Poseidon, gets petulant and jealous because, he feels like a lesser of a man when we give devotion to other gods. Like they had such a low and petty view of God. But that's not our God. God is perfectly existent, perfectly sustaining his own existence and joy and happiness. And when we as Christians worship God, we don't add to anything. God has created us out of an abundance of his joy and happiness and blessedness. And as a result, although we are invited to worship and glorify God, we don't add anything fundamental in the sense that we don't give him anything that he himself does not have. And so that's the first attribute of God's deity.